Thing I want to talk to you about today that we don't talk about a whole lot, or I don't think it comes up a whole lot. It's this idea that when we talk about Jesus, I don't know if we think about Jesus as being a great leader. Now, we think of Jesus sometimes as being a wonderful religious figure, okay? But here's the thing about following somebody. You don't want to follow somebody that's not a good leader. Right? So the idea becomes this, and here's what I want to throw at you this morning, that if Jesus is someone to be followed, he must be a leader worth following. Make sense? I mean, you don't want to follow somebody that's going to lead you off the edge of a cliff. Right? You want to, is he worthy to be followed? Now here's the, I don't know if stigma is the right word, it's the word I'm going to use. Here's the stigma I think we and that's innovated, right? And when we think about religion, we think about the past. Or when we think about a leader, we think of somebody, and this is probably more spot on. When we think about an innovative leader that's worth following, we think of somebody that's all about change, right? When we think about some of the leaders that have come across in our generation, Steve Jobs and some of these, and Bill Gates and some of these guys that are innovators and thinkers, they're always thinking about changing things, changing the status quo. And when we think about religion, we think about institutions and establishments, and many times, they're anti-change. They use the excuse, well, we've always done it this way. And so sometimes we cast that lens, we cast that view onto Jesus. But Jesus is an extraordinary leader. And don't just take my word for it. Think about this. If you're in business, you're in industry, you're talking about leadership, if you're in any kind of leadership role, I want you to think about this. Jesus' brand, he established in 3 years. He has multiple, thousands and thousands and thousands of outlets worldwide, and he never chalked up one single frequent flyer mile. I mean, come on. That's pretty innovative, isn't it? You think about that for a minute, because here's the thing when we talk about Jesus being a leader. Not only was he very innovative, not only was he cutting edge, he was counterculture too. And he was all about change. He was changing the status quo of the religious establishment at that particular time. It's not just those things that make him a leader. He's an exceptional leader. And he teaches on this today. And I want to take you to this one point where he talks about the key to successful leadership. And if you're in a place of authority, if you're in a place to where you lead somebody, to where you have people that report to you, and listen, there may be some of you in here and you're like, well, I'm not really like that. Well, if you're a mom or dad, okay, you fall into that criteria as well, because you have little ones that you are leading, or you will have little ones that you are leading. Now, before I say this, let me say this. Okay, I think I said it right. I don't know. If you're not a follower of Jesus, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to take away from this. All right? I mean, that's up to you. I recommend you take all of it, or a lot of it. But if you're a Jesus follower, if you're someone that says, yeah, I'm into following Jesus, then this isn't just a suggestion. This is a command. Okay? So as we go forward, everybody's nervous now. Let's just go ahead and point out the white elephant in the room. All right? So Jesus, let me kind of back up where we're going with this. Jesus is one day having a conversation with his disciples, and he's getting ready to drop on them one of the greatest leadership principles that has ever been discovered when we talk about this idea of cutting-edge leadership. And he's having a discussion, and we're going to find it in the book of Mark. All right. Now, Mark he wasn't one of Jesus' original disciples, okay? he comes along afterwards, but we know that he was friends with Peter. As a matter of fact, he's probably a ghostwriter for Peter. It looks like that he takes everything that Peter kind of says and then Mark translates, because Peter didn't know how to read or write. He was a fisherman. He was illiterate, so he told John Mark all of these things, and Mark wrote them all down. So here's the story that we're going to pick up this morning. It's in Mark chapter 10. If you're following along with us at home, we're glad to have you. If you're here in house and you're here for the first time, we are glad to have you, whether you're here for the first time or the 101st time, okay? Let's just kind of peer into this conversation that we see Jesus having with his disciples, okay? And here's how it's going to start off. They were on their way to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way. That's always a pretty good place to be, right? Jesus out in front and not me, right? Don't follow me. I'll get you into trouble. You don't have to say anything, okay? But follow Jesus, right? And the disciples were, and on the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. This is in reference to something that had just happened. Jesus had just got through saying, but Jesus is getting ready to say something else that's going to scare him too. Here's what he says. And again, he took the 12 aside, and he told them what was going to happen to him. Now, if you were here last week, what Jesus is getting ready to say to him, we're going to find out here in just a minute. Go ahead and flip it to the next one. We talked about this last week, that Jesus had this conversation with his disciples on multiple occasions where he says this, hey, things have been going really well. We're really popular. There's crowds that are gathering. You know, people are getting healed. There's a big buzz. There's an uproar. We've got some mojo working. We've got momentum. But I'm here to tell you guys, it's about to go south. So you better make sure you're mentally strapped for about what's going to happen here in just a little bit. We have been successful up to this particular point when we go to Jerusalem of not being arrested. You know, the crowds have kind of kept the Pharisees away sometimes too, and there have been some things where they've been unsuccessful, but they're about to be successful this time. So I'm just preparing you for what's about to happen. Now, if you don't believe in Jesus, that's between you and God, okay? But here's the thing that I never can get around when we talk about Jesus and when I have this conversation with people that are outside of the church. Have you ever known anybody that called their own shot? Meaning they called the way they were going to die. Then it happened. Then they called their own resurrection. I'm just going to go safely say, I don't know everybody in here, I'm just going to safely say you've never known anybody that's done that. Okay, and if you have, you don't need to be in here. You need to be following them wherever they're going. Okay, so Jesus, he's going to call his own shot, call his own resurrection, and then pull it off. I don't know of anybody else in the history of mankind that's pulled that off. That's a sidebar. That's not even really part of the sermon. Okay. Well, it is now, but okay. We're going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles. That will be the Romans, okay, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him, kill him, and on the third day, stop it right here, okay, and third day he will rise. Now, you know how it just got quiet all in here? Because this is a serious moment, isn't it? This is a serious moment. I would dare say with this, I wasn't there that day, but I would dare say that this is a pretty tender moment for Jesus, where he's going, again, guys, here's what's going to happen. Come in close. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to Jerusalem, and this is not going to be like all the other times. This time's going to be different. And it's been going good up to this time, but it's getting ready to get bad, and I mean real bad. And I'm going to be arrested. I'm going to get flogged. I'm going to be crucified. It's going to get ugly. Okay, I think there's this real tender moment here where the disciples are getting pulled in, and then this happens. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said. Now, this is right after Jesus has said this. We haven't skipped any verses. No verses have been skipped. We're not cherry-picking verses here. This is right after Jesus just got through saying that. Here's what they say. Would you do us a favor? Now, this is, how many of you got our parents in here? Golly, raise your hand. Don't be ashamed of it. I mean, okay, I'm going to claim this. This is like when you're a parent and you're like kneeling beside your children's bed, or you're having dinner with them, and you're a parent, and there's this teachable moment, and you're making eye contact with your kids, and you're going, and I just want you to remember, honey. I just want you to remember, sweetheart. I just want you to remember, little man, that Daddy loves you way more than Mom. Okay? And you're having this like real, where you're connecting, you're teaching them this life moment, and that kid looks up at you and they go, and you're like, do you have any questions? And they're like, you got a booger hanging out of your nose, Daddy. Or, can I go upstairs now? Or, can you get me something to drink? And you're like, man, I just wasted all of that time. Did they even get it? I mean, this is kind of, imagine Jesus doing this. I mean, think about this for a minute. So then Jesus goes, they're not getting it. They're not getting it. So here's what happens. They replied, hey, can one of us sit at the right hand and the other sit at your left in glory? We don't really care about what's going to happen to you. I mean, that whole flogging and arresting and spitting, that sounds terrible. But, after all that goes down, because what they're thinking, here's what they're thinking, and this is crucial when we start to understand the dynamics between not only the disciples, but the people that followed him. They think Jesus, at some time, he's going to shed those rabbinic robes. He's going to shed that religious figure robe, and he's going to come as the earthly king, the Messiah. They're thinking Jesus, or the Messiah of the Old Testament, that the Old Testament's been prophesying about for thousands and thousands of years. They're thinking this. He's going to come as an earthly king. So there's going to be a point in time when Jesus takes off that prayer shawl and straps on a sword. And man, heads are going to roll when that happens. And so what the disciples are saying, this is why we've talked about this in All Through Hot Mess, that you don't necessarily have to believe Jesus is everything that the Bible says he is when you're first starting to follow him. Okay? Because the disciples here, they don't get it yet, do they? Now, they're going to, and you will too eventually. Right? And I will too eventually. I'm still a work in progress as well. Again, no comment. But you see what I'm saying? They think Jesus is going to be this earthly king. They think he's going to be an earthly Messiah. So they're jockeying for position. And they're saying, hey, listen, we don't want to be you, because I don't really like the whole idea of the arresting and flogging and spitting and all that stuff. But when we know you're going to have the penthouse office, but can we have some corner offices with some windows? You think we can do some of that? And then Jesus says these things to him. Here's one of the things he says to him. When the 10 heard about this, Jesus tells them, he goes, you can't handle what's getting ready to happen to me. He has that moment where he says, you can't handle the truth. That moment. He's going, you think you want this, but you really don't want this. It's kind of like that time when you think you know what you want and you're praying for it. but you don't really know sometimes, do you? So this is what's getting ready to happen, and Jesus is walking through the disciples, and he's going, you better be careful, because you can't handle what's getting ready to be dished out. Now, here's what kind of plays out. When the other 10 disciples hear about it, they became indignant with James and John. Now, here's what we think. They're not getting indignant because they're like, dudes, that's so uncool. Jesus just talked about getting flogged and arrested and spit on, and y'all are being so insensitive. See, that's not what they're indignant about. They're indignant about, wait a minute, whoa. I want some of the corner office too. You can't have all the glory. I want some of it too. They're mad about, they think they're going to lose their spot. And they want the spots beside Jesus. They want to be the little you under Jesus. They want that for themselves. And then Jesus says, hey, all right, guys, gather in. Now, last week when I gathered you all in, I put Peter up front because I needed to keep an eye on him. But this time it's going to be James and John. Y'all get in here. Everybody gather around. Everybody circle in. We got something we need to talk about. And this is where Jesus lays out the greatest leadership principle to you and I, and that the world, I believe, has ever heard. This is what makes Jesus an extraordinary leader. Jesus called them together. All right, gather in. Tell the Baptist, again, get off the back row. Come on up here. Jesus called together and he said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it. That word lord in the Greek, it's where it really means to like press down. It would be the equivalent, the Rolling Stones song, Under My Thumb? That's kind of the mental picture, all right? I know I am dating myself, but it really means to have your hand so heavy upon somebody they can't move. Okay, that's kind of the mental picture, under my thumb. You're kind of under my thumb. The Gentiles lorded over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. That word exercise, I mean the authority right here, it means an abuse of power. Okay, so Jesus is saying this. You guys know how the world works, don't you? I mean, you guys have seen the Romans and how the Romans do everything, right? And they're all going, yeah. Well, when they're in authority, here's how they do it. You're basically, everybody that's under them is there to serve them. They're there to do their bidding. Meaning that when they're in a place of authority, everybody around them pushes and works just for them. You've seen this, haven't you? And they're going, yeah. That's why they're saying, Jesus, that's why we know we can't be you, we can't be big Lord, but we want to be little lords. Because we like the idea of lording rather than the idea of being lorded on. So that's why we're kind of asking you this right now. And Jesus says, I understand that. I get that part. And he goes, and you've seen this happen all through your lives, don't you? Slaves do it with their masters. Employees do it with people. And kings, they all have these subjects that work for them because they're the number one priority. When it comes to authority, it's all about them. It's all about their reputation. It's all about bettering themselves. And they're all going, that's exactly why we want it. And then Jesus says this, not so with you. This to me, these four little words, this is where it kind of takes on a mother and a father's conversation with their children. Where, when you ever have that conversation with your children and you're trying to show them something and you're going, you see these kids over here that are running around like chickens with their heads cut off? That don't act like they got sense that God gave a goose? And your kids are going, that ain't going to be you. Right? You with me? Right? And your kids go, And then they run off and do the exact same thing, do the exact opposite thing. But Jesus is saying this. He's going, you see how the Gentiles do it? You see how the Romans do it? You see how our culture does it? You see how society does it? Do you see all of these things? This is how leadership and authority works in the world. You see all that, don't you? And they're going, yep. And he's going, that's not going to be you. You're not going to do it that way. And they're going, okay, I guess. And then he goes, whoever wants to become great, or that word right there, just it can translate over into leader. Whoever wants to lead, whoever wants to be a king, whoever wants to be an authority, whoever wants to be a boss, whoever wants to be a ruler among you, and he goes on. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave to all. So the disciples are thinking kind of what you're thinking. They're going, what? How does that go work? I mean, I don't get it. I mean, we're never going to get anything done. What are you talking about? This is totally counterintuitive, isn't it? This is totally flipping the world upside down as they know it. This may be flipping your world upside down as you know it. Because here's what some people are thinking, and if you run a business, or if you're a manager, or if you're an authority, some of y'all are thinking this. Oh man, how can I get this link to my boss without him knowing it's me? But some of you may be in here and you may be bosses, right? You may be managers. You may run your own companies. You may be in places of leadership where people report to you. And our first thought when we think about this, when we bring up stuff like this, is this. Pastor Scott, I mean, I know this works great on Sunday morning, and I know it probably works great in your world because you work at a church. You know, and this sounds really good in churchy kind of terms and in churchy waters, and you may get away with this working at the church, but this won't work in the real marketplace. This won't work in real business. This doesn't translate. I mean, it sounds good on paper. It sounds good when you preach it, you know, but this isn't going to compute in the real world. This is kind of what we think when we think about these particular things and when we think about this particular thing. Now, here's something that's important to say. Jesus isn't saying that you need to hold the door for everybody that comes into the office. You know, like, oh, come on in. And you just sit there all day and you're just, you know, you just wait on them and wait on them and wait on them and wait on them. That's not what Jesus is saying. And he's also not preaching against point leadership either. Y'all know what point leadership is? Okay, let me explain them. I'm going to take your silence as a no. Point leadership is there's one person in point, right? And then there's people that are all under. Jesus isn't saying I'm against point leadership and we need to run all of this by committee, because Jesus was a point leader. Right? So he's not saying don't do point leadership. He's not saying that at all. What he's saying is this, and this is absolutely crucial when we talk about these particular things. Do we have, run me to the next one. There. We should leverage our authority for the benefit of those under our authority. This is what Jesus is talking about when he says we need to be a slave to all. We need to show that we're going to show servant leadership. What he's saying about this, you know the pros and cons of this, don't you? How many of you, don't raise any hands, especially if your boss is in here. How many of you have ever worked for somebody that it was all about them? There better not be any staff members who agree to that. Okay. No, but but you know, it's all about their reputation. It's about forwarding their career. It's about everybody under them is there to serve them. And you can put up with anything. You should do anything in order to better that particular person. And we've seen that. We've worked under that. And most people that are under that, they can't wait to get out from under that. They're just waiting for an opportunity to leave. I mean, they're like, I hate my job. But I'm going to do it because the money's decent and it pays the bills. But, man, as soon as I get a chance, I am gone. It's going to be later tater. And I am blowing this outfit. Right? How many of you, though, have ever worked under somebody that does this? Can you imagine what it would be like? Just imagine for a moment to work for somebody that isn't looking out for them. Because here's the thing. If you're working for somebody that's out for them, then your only recourse is to look out for you. Well, when you create that kind of environment, it's not conducive to get not only productivity, but as far as mentally being healthy or emotionally healthy. But imagine an environment, and this is so cool, I think, sometimes. Imagine an environment to where your boss is looking out for you. To where it's not necessarily all about the company bottom line, but it's about where are you at? How are you doing? Is there anything that I can help move along with you? That's what Jesus is talking about in this particular passage. Now, it leads us to this idea. How do you create an environment? Now, if you're a boss, or if you're a mom, if you're a dad, right, and you run your own family company at the house, right, or you're starting out, or you're an employee somewhere, and you're aspiring to be a boss, or you are a boss, okay? Here's how do you make this work? How do you put handles on this? Where does the application come in? And this can work either whether you're a boss or whether you're just an employee. If you want to change the environment of where you work, and if you want to change the temperature of where you work, you start asking a couple of questions I want to give you this morning, and things will change. Not only in your family, but at where you work. And this is absolutely crucial when we talk about following Jesus. Because here's the thing about this. If you're following Jesus, you can't just follow him on Sunday. And you can't just follow him when things are easy. We've talked about this. There will be times when your will and God's will collide. Now, hopefully it won't be often, but there will be times. And there will be times when this comes about right here. And when you're in a place of authority, when you're the one that calls shots, when you have people that you're responsible for. And Jesus says this is the greatest leadership principle. And here's the question that can start it all off. Right here. What can I do to help? If you're a boss, you walk in the office tomorrow. Right? And let's just be honest. Maybe you haven't been leading like this, and that's okay. But if you walk by a couple of cubicles tomorrow and you stick your head over the thing and go, I know you guys are working. Anything I can help you with? They will pass out. Boom! Hit the floor. And you'll be like, this is so cool. This is the best sermon I ever heard. I actually tried it and it worked. They did pass out. Right, but how much would things change? Now think about this. How much would things change? How much would things change in your family dynamics or in your business dynamics if you started asking this question? Just one person. Now, you do it and do it and do it for 2 or 3 months. Then there are other employees in your business that start doing this too. How will that change the temperature of your employment? Oh, come on. How will it change the temperature of your family? Because what you're really saying is this. You're saying this right here. Next one. There you go. How can I loan me to you? How can I leverage my authority? How can I leverage my resources? How can I leverage my influence? How can I leverage my status? How can I leverage these things to help you? I did family counseling when I was first early on in ministry. I don't ever recommend you do that. I mean, the counseling part of it, let's face it, all y'all need that. You know what I'm saying? But don't, the counselor part of it. I used to do a lot of counseling, and then I found out this is not my gift. That's why I leave it to professionals, all right? But I was counseling this one family, and this was one time where it actually worked, where the families had, the family had just kind of, they had just kind of pulled themselves off into separate little territories to where it was just about me and my stuff, and I'm just going to do my thing, and I don't really care. So I said, why don't we just start asking this question? And I mean, in a month later, that whole dynamic changed. It reminds me of the story. I don't know how many of you have ever heard the story about the starfish and the little boy. But there's a little boy walking along a beach one day, and there's a storm that just happened. Thousands and thousands and thousands of starfish washed up onto the shore. And there's this older man, and he's watching this little boy as he walks along. This little boy periodically will just pick up starfish and just fling them back into the ocean. And the old man watched the little boy do it for hours, just hours. And he finally just walks down to where the little boy is, and the little boy's thrown hundreds of starfish into the ocean by this time. And he said, son, you do realize that that's not making much of a difference, right? And he was like, yeah, I know it won't make a difference to all of them, but it makes a world of difference to this one. What can you do to loan yourself to somebody, to leverage your authority, to leverage where you are in life, to say, how can I help you? Now, here's where I think we have to kind of differentiate stuff, and this leads me to my next question, and this is it. Look for opportunities to do for the one what you wish you could do for everyone. And we try to do this here at Waterbrook. This is one of the things we do. Because you know why? This is what Jesus did. He couldn't heal everybody, but he healed some. He couldn't visit everybody, but he visited some. He couldn't go to every single town, but he went to some. See, this is a question I get sometimes. Well, where's the benefit in that? Why would you do that? This is the gospel. This is God looking down at earth and saying, they're messed up, they're screwed up, they're busted up, they're a hot mess. They need some help. I think I'm going to loan myself to them. I think I'm going to help them out where they're at. I think I'm going to lift them up wherever they're at in life right now. I think I'm going to raise their status a little bit more because they're in need of some serious help, and I want to help them out. This is what God did for you and I, didn't he? And so Jesus says, this is the kind of leadership that I want you to emulate to others. I want you to emulate this kind of leadership to others. Now, here's where I think, and I'm going to close with this, but here's where I think that, man, it's so hard sometimes, especially if you're a guy, you know, or if you've kind of been raised up in this particular model where it's about yourself and it's about, you know, you have to project yourself and you have to rise yourself up and you have to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And Jesus isn't preaching against productivity here because he's all for that. They got a lot of things done. A lot of things done. But what Jesus is saying here, he's saying this, wherever you're at, where you have authority, I want you to leverage it for the good. I want you to become a servant leader. And I want you to place people in the same vein and in the same lens that God placed you. When he came along and he helped you. Here's why I think this is the most applicational teaching when it comes to Christianity. Because this, how much are you at work? Too much? 8 hours? 8 hours a day? 10 hours a day? Some of you 12 hours a day, right? So think about this. Think about the influence that you can have on people by doing leadership this way. And if you don't think it works, just talk to Apple, Facebook. One of the things that they do that people love to work for them, they're like, oh my gosh, I came in, they have a masseuse come in every single Wednesday. You know, I mean, have you ever heard about some of the stuff that they do? They have all of these plans. They have all of these things. They have all of these perks. They bring in Starbucks. They bring in that. They do this. They have every single day there's something going on. Why? Because the management team has figured out if we care for our employees, then their productivity will go up. Because they'll want to be here. They'll want to work here. They will want to be a part of what's going on. They're modeling Jesus' leadership model, and they don't even know it. They're like, man, I can't believe he came up with that. He didn't come up with that. Jesus came up with that 2,000 and some years ago. Right? I mean, it's like when Disney started doing Shrek, a talking donkey. God had a corner on that thousands of years before with Balaam and his donkey. That ain't nothing new. But here's where I think this is where it gets so tangible. And it gets so, man, I mean, it becomes such a powerful witness for us. It really does because I would love for people to, I mean, not necessarily say it like this, but if they said it with this tone in their minds. I don't really care about going to church. I don't really care about being a Jesus follower. But I sure would like to work for one. You know, I don't really care about, being a Jesus follower or anything. But I'm going to tell you one thing. I sure do like to work with them. Because they care about you. Because they care about people. Because they put me sometimes even ahead of them. Holy cow. That's awesome. I mean, that's awesome. Because here's the thing. Let me say it like this, and this is going to shock you at first, all right? But let me say it and I'll explain it. Are you really worth living your life for? And what I mean by that is this. If you spend 70 years, 80 years, however long, selling your brand where it's about me, all for your glory, all to rising up your status, to getting you where you want to be, following the culture and the society's world marked for leadership. Say that's and it's all about you and you and you. You do realize that when you die, in about 5 or 10 years, anybody outside of your family is not going to remember you. More than likely. And in 20 years after that, you're just going to be a picture in somebody's picture frame. I mean, how much do you think about your grandparents now? There are some of you that I think about them every single day. I get it. But after you die, what if you were to leverage what you do have, not for you, but for Jesus? I mean, how many people are going to be talking about us 2,000 years from now? I mean, if they're even talking at all. Right? But 2,000 years, we're still talking about him. So, what we have, why not leverage for something greater than us? And Jesus finishes up this conversation with his disciples today, and he says this, and I'm going to leave you with these words. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give. Read it out loud. So when I lead the way that Jesus wants me to lead, at my place of business, where I work, at my home, then I am giving my life, because it's not about me. It's not about my glory. It's not about how the children can serve me. Although I do kind of like that idea of, sometimes bringing me my dinner plate every now and then, you know what I'm saying? But it's not about that. It's about, through my leadership, leveraging the authority God's blessed me with, God gave me, to say, I want to care for these people. Because think about this. You've got people, some of you that you're their boss. You've got people under you that don't know Jesus. What better way to introduce them to that than working side by side with them for 8 hours a day and leading the way that Jesus wants you to lead, not the way the world or our culture or our society says lead. It's a way for you to give your life to something that's greater than you and me. So this week, where are you going to start? How are you going to do it? What's God calling you to? Man, this is exciting. This is exciting because this can change the trajectory not only of your life, but others. Just through following Jesus. Join me as we go to the Lord in prayer. Father, in the name of Christ, thank you for the example of Jesus. Thank you that he is this extraordinary leader. I know that sometimes I have been guilty of just thinking about him as a religious deity. But Father, in Christ, we have such a wonderful example of true leadership and what it means to be a servant leader. Father, that we give our authority, that we leverage it all for the kingdom, all for others, that we may help others out where they're at. Father, may it be our prayer this week. I pray that we ask you, bring us to places to where we can help others. Show me in my workplace how I can loan myself out to others to help them. Let me do for the one what I'd love to do for the many. Help me, I pray, to grab a hold of this leadership principle that the gospel exudes and incorporate it into my life and into the lives of others. I ask this, Father, all for your glory. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.